This is an ABC News special report.
Good morning, I'm Michelle Franzen in New York. We are coming on the air with breaking news from the Middle East. Air raid sirens in Israel going off, and Israel's defense minister announcing Israel launched what it called a preemptive strike against Iran, telling Israelis to brace for a likely drone and missile attack, and declaring a state of emergency across Israel. Let's get straight to our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, who is in Tel Aviv. Ian, tell us what you know.
Yeah, good morning. This is what everybody had been anticipating for many days. I think everyone expected that it would be a U.S.-launched attack, but according to an Israeli official, this has been a joint strike by U.S. And Israeli forces. We were woken up to the sound of the air raid siren. And as you say, the Israeli Defense Minister Katz has issued this statement saying, yes, this was a preemptive strike, as they refer to it, against Iran. They declare a state of emergency across the country. They're also warning of the risk of missile and drone attacks. This obviously follows this moribund negotiations that have been going on for the last few weeks between Iran and the US. The president waiting to hear that Iran was going to agree to his terms. It clearly looks like that hasn't happened, and this is clearly a developing situation. We're getting reports that there have been explosions inside Tehran, the Iranian capital. I can tell you, just looking out here, the streets are completely empty. Everyone has heeded the warning. Everyone has been on tenterhooks for the last few days, expecting this action to take place. But as of now, Israel saying it's launched this preemptive action, and we have to wait and see how Tehran responds.
And Ian, you said that some of those strikes might have hit Tehran, but we really don't know exactly what's going on and where those preemptive strikes, as Israel calls them, struck. That strike by Israel comes as the U.S. was also building up military resources the past several weeks, sending fighter jets to the region along with Navy ships and carrier strike teams. President Trump earlier expressing that he wanted to reach that diplomatic solution, but he also signaled that he wasn't happy with the latest round of talks in Geneva just a few days ago. Let's go to ABC News analyst and retired Colonel Steve Ganyard. Steve, with Israel making that first strike, what does that tell? We don't have Ganyard right now, but as we mentioned, the U.S. has amassed a large military presence across the region, all the elements for the U.S. to carry out those strikes. ABC's Martha Raddatz, of course, knows that region very well. Martha, tell us what this might signal for the president and the U.S.
Well, obviously, we've had this massive buildup, the largest buildup of forces in the region truly in decades. You have about 35,000 U.S. forces in the region. We have obviously been watching this for weeks, and President Trump has been talking about this show of force, and now it is clear they are using that show of force. One of the plans, and what a preemptive strike is they are trying to get Tehran's weapons before they launch. Iran has thousands of missiles, and what the U.S. and Israel want to do is take those out before they launch. That is the biggest fear here, is the retaliation. It is what Ian is obviously talking about there in Israel, but also the many U.S. bases in the region. They have tried to fortify all of those bases in the past few weeks. The ships that the U.S. has 2 aircraft carriers in the region. Fortify those, protect U.S. personnel. Some have been moved out of the region. Equipment, warplanes have been moved out of the region. Not only do they have warplanes coming in to take place in this strike, but they have many moving out of some of those bases to protect them. But the plan has always been, if they launched this strike, to try to take out Iran's weaponry before they could retaliate. But there is still a fear about that retaliation, whether it's missiles, whether it's drones, whether it comes from the proxy groups around Iran and those around Israel as well.
Those are the visuals that we're looking at right now, Martha. We're seeing visuals from Israel, and we're also, just stick with me here, you know, the president those are from Iran. Those visuals coming in after that preemptive strike from Israel. If you're just joining us, that's exactly what just happened in the last hour. Israel's foreign minister saying that Israel carried out a preemptive strike in Iran and parts of Iran. And we're not getting, of course, information from there, but you can see plumes that are up in the air, and these are preemptive strikes, as Martha just mentioned, trying to get at some of those drones and missiles. And we want to go back to Ian Pannell, who is in Tel Aviv, in the region there, and he's setting the mood there. You had mentioned that those streets are very bare right now after that state of emergency was issued.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's just gone 9 o'clock in the morning, and just looking at the road behind me, there are almost no cars out there. Even last night, the streets were very, very empty. I think Israelis have been expecting that this would happen. In some senses, this is, for Israel, the logical conclusion of what happened on October the 7th, 2023, this process of Israel trying to neuter those countries, those groups that it considers as an existential threat. But this obviously was led by the United States. And I think a key thing for us to look out for now is, what does President Trump want to achieve from this? What does Prime Minister Netanyahu want to achieve? I think for Israel it's probably a more pragmatic matter of just diminishing Iran's ballistic missile capability. And as Martha said there, what they're likely to go after are probably the launchers in the first instance, the command and control systems. Those are the kinds of targets you would expect them to go for, as they did in June last year when Israel launched its military strike against Iran. It led to this 12-day war. The United States was involved at the end of that, and we have to wait and see from the US, from President Trump, exactly what they actually want to achieve. In other words, you know, what you weren't able to achieve at the negotiating table, are you going to be able to achieve that through the barrel of the gun? But I think for Israelis, they've had this long, extended period of conflict. They're used to this process. As soon as the sirens go off, many people have shelters in their homes, in their offices, in their schools, and that's probably what's going on right now. They're sheltering in place. We were here in June last year, and I can tell you, Iranian missiles were raining down on Tel Aviv and other cities across Israel, and it's frightening, it's terrifying, as it is, of course, for Iranians on the other side. And Israelis kind of know through experience exactly what to do, and I think the Home Front Command will be bolstering the advice to citizens to be alert, to heed those air raid sirens, and to take shelter when they can. And it's eerie quiet.
Yeah,
we had that strike and we had the alert. I think people are now just waiting to see what the Iranian response will be.
And you mentioned the past year, of course, in June when they had the strikes, that the U.S. was defensively helping with that. But also, it's been relative calm for Israelis since that ceasefire between Gaza and Hamas was solidified just months ago. But now here we are again with them in the state of alert as Israel makes that preemptive strike. And the question is, what is the U.S. going to do? What does this mean for the U.S. in terms of having all its military resources in place, and whether or not the president will decide to do something either defensive for Israel, or whether he has other options on the table?
Yeah, I think that's right. We have to hear from the president. I mean, he's talked about a number of different things, a number of different reasons for potential military action. He said that Iran shouldn't be allowed to have a nuclear weapon, and he repeats this line that Iran hasn't ensured that it won't have a nuclear weapon, when in actual fact Iran has said repeatedly that it won't. He said that Iran shouldn't have any kind of enrichment. We believe in the negotiations Iran has offered something around that, possibly a limited guarantee that they won't enrich for the next 1 to 5 years. But what's he going to achieve through the barrel of a gun that he can't achieve at the negotiating table? I think that is going to be a key question going forward. Firstly, we need to see what it is that the US plans to do. What is this vast array of firepower throughout the region, but to what end? And where does it end as well? You know, the risk of escalation is very acute. Iran has said that it will respond to an attack, not just just against Israel, but against U.S. assets and facilities throughout the region. That means U.S. bases, which are very much in target range for the Iranians. Now, if they target one of those bases, if there's a loss of life from U.S. servicemen or women, how does the president then respond? In other words, starting this may look relatively straightforward, but ending it could be very difficult.
Ian, panel in Tel Aviv, but we're seeing images from Tehran after Israel says it took preemptive strikes. We want to go back to Martha Raddatz real quickly. Martha, we've talked about the past year in terms of how we got here, but let's talk about just these past few months, from the demonstrations in Iran that were taking place, but also these negotiations between U.S. and Iran that were also going on.
They have been ongoing, these negotiations, but if you remember, President Trump at first threatened to go after Iran in the last month because of the massive protests that you saw across Iran, and thousands killed, thousands of protesters, according to human rights groups who are keeping track of this. The president threatened Iran, and then he has talked very little about the protests, that is not the reason that President Trump wanted to go into Iran. He talked about these nuclear sites. Just at the State of the Union, the president said that he wanted to make sure that Iran didn't have a nuclear weapon, but he also said at the State of the Union that the U.S. had obliterated the nuclear facilities inside Iran. That is clearly not the case if he wants to go back and get rid of the enriched uranium. He wants to make sure these facilities are destroyed. I have to say it's quite unusual that they would go after Tehran in the daytime. I think one of the reasons that President Trump in the past, in his first term, didn't want to go after Iran, they were worried about killing people. That is obviously collateral damage, innocent people. We don't know what we are looking at in terms of the strike in Tehran, but it is clearly in broad daylight and people are likely on the streets. During these negotiations, I think one thing to remember is that as of yesterday, when these negotiations and the president said he wasn't happy with them, the Iranians surely knew this would happen and would happen soon, that this wasn't just a show of force. President Trump was very serious about taking action.
Martha Raddatz, thank you for joining us. And again, Israel carrying out preemptive strikes in areas of Tehran. And we're going to return you to regular programming. We'll have a lot more on Good Morning America later this morning. I'm Michelle Franzen in New York.
This has been a special report from ABC News.